Chapter 1. The shadows of loss. The streets of Rome were draped in black as news of Germanicus's death spread like wildfire through the city. On that fateful day in October 19 AD, a great void was left in the hearts of Romans, from the highest echelons of the Senate to the common people. Germanicus Julius Caesar had become more than just a military leader. He was a symbol of Roman virtue, courage, and the hope for a brighter future. As the sun rose over the sprawling city, the mourning began. Families adorned their homes with black drapery, symbolizing their grief for the beloved general. Shops closed their doors, and the usual hustle and bustle of Rome came to a standstill. The populace was united in sorrow, sharing stories of Germanicus's bravery and benevolence, each tale more poignant than the last. Chapter 2. The funeral preparations. The Senate convened to discuss the arrangements for a grand funeral, recognizing the profound impact Germanicus had on the Roman people. The honor bestowed upon him would reflect his status as a national hero. Plans for a public mourning ceremony were swiftly put into motion, with elaborate arrangements made to ensure that the tribute would be a fitting farewell. Funeral officials began preparing for a procession that would wind through the streets of Rome. His body, preserved for the occasion, would be placed on a grand funeral pyre in the Forum, where the citizens could pay their final respects. Statues of Germanicus adorned the streets, and artisans were commissioned to create elaborate wreaths and garlands to decorate the route of the procession. Agrippina, the widow of Germanicus, played a significant role in the preparations. She was determined to honor her husband's memory and to ensure that the public mourning reflected the love and respect he had earned during his life. As she directed the preparations, her strength and poise inspired those around her. Chapter 3. The day of mourning. On the day of the funeral, a somber atmosphere enveloped the city. Thousands of Romans poured into the streets, their faces etched with grief. The mood was palpable, an overwhelming sense of loss hanging in the air like a shroud. As the sun rose higher, casting its light upon the gathered crowd, a procession of soldiers, senators, and citizens made their way to the Forum. The sound of drums echoed through the streets, signaling the start of the procession. A contingent of Germanicus's loyal soldiers marched in formation, their armor glinting in the sunlight, representing the very legions that had fought alongside him in battle. They carried the body of Germanicus on a richly adorned bier, draped with the insignia of the legions he had commanded. As the procession moved through the city, people lined the streets, throwing flowers and chanting Germanicus's name. Tears flowed freely as mourners recounted tales of his bravery and leadership. Each step of the procession was met with reverent silence, the crowds paying homage to the man who had fought for Rome and its ideals. Chapter 4. The heart of the Forum. Upon reaching the Forum, the heart of Roman public life, the atmosphere shifted. The bier was placed in front of the rostra, where orators would traditionally address the crowd. Here, the people gathered to pay their respects, and the air was thick with emotion. Senators took turns speaking, recounting Germanicus's valiant campaigns in Germania and his commitment to the Roman people. They painted a vivid picture of a man who had not only been a brilliant military strategist but also a devoted husband and father. The speeches were filled with eloquent words of praise, but they also carried an underlying message: the need for unity in the face of loss. Among the speakers was Tiberius, Germanicus's own uncle. The emperor, who had once seen the general as a potential threat, now stood before the grieving crowd, adorned in a toga of mourning. His presence was met with mixed emotions. While some mourners appreciated the gesture, others viewed it with skepticism, recalling the tension between the two men. Tiberius spoke of Germanicus's legacy, carefully navigating the delicate balance between honoring the deceased and asserting his own authority. Chapter 5. Agrippina's tribute. As the speeches concluded, it was Agrippina's turn to address the crowd. Clad in mourning garments, she stood before the assembly, her heart heavy yet resolute. Her voice, though choked with emotion, rang out clear and strong as she began to recount the life of her husband. She spoke of Germanicus's love for his family and his unwavering commitment to the ideals of Rome. Agrippina painted a picture of a man who had dedicated his life to the empire, fighting not just for glory but for the well-being of its people. Her words resonated with the crowd, igniting a wave of collective grief that swept through the Forum. Let us not only mourn the loss of a great general, Agrippina implored, but let us also celebrate the man who loved us all and fought tirelessly for the future of our children. He dreamed of a Rome united in strength and honor, and it is our duty to uphold that dream. As tears streamed down her cheeks, the crowd responded with thunderous applause. They were moved not just by her words but by the palpable love she exuded for her late husband. Agrippina's tribute solidified her place in the hearts of the Roman people, and in that moment, she became a figure of strength and resilience. Chapter 6. The pyre of remembrance. As dusk descended upon the city, the time came for the final farewell. The bier was placed atop a grand funeral pyre, adorned with wreaths and tokens of love from the citizens. Soldiers formed a protective circle around the pyre, their faces reflecting the sorrow that gripped the nation. The flames were lit, and the fire quickly spread, illuminating the night sky. As the flames danced, the crowd began to chant Germanicus's name, their voices rising in a chorus of remembrance. The air was thick with incense, mingling with the scent of burning wood and flowers, creating an atmosphere of both grief and celebration. As the flames consumed the body of Germanicus, the crowd watched in silence, united in their sorrow and admiration. It was a moment of catharsis, a release of emotions that had been pent up since the day of his death. Each flicker of flame seemed to represent a life dedicated to Rome, a spirit that would never truly fade. Chapter 7. The aftermath of mourning. In the days following the funeral, the impact of Germanicus's death continued to reverberate throughout Rome. The mourning did not end with the flames, rather, it sparked a movement among the people. The citizens rallied together, united in their grief and inspired by the legacy of the fallen general. Public gatherings became a regular occurrence, where citizens would share stories of Germanicus, reminding one another of the ideals he stood for. These gatherings transformed into a platform for discussing the future of Rome, igniting conversations about governance, justice, and the need for change within the empire. Agrippina emerged as a prominent figure in these discussions, advocating for the rights of the Senate and the people. Her courage and determination resonated with many, and she quickly gained a following among those who sought to challenge Tiberius's rule. She became a beacon of hope for the people, symbolizing the possibility of a brighter future, even in the face of great adversity. Chapter 8. The political ramifications. The public mourning for Germanicus had significant political ramifications. Tiberius, who had initially viewed Germanicus as a rival, found himself navigating a delicate political landscape. The mourning period had shifted the sentiment of the people, and their allegiance to Germanicus transformed into a subtle challenge to Tiberius's authority. The Senate, aware of the growing unrest, began to reassess its relationship with Tiberius. While some senators remained loyal to the emperor, others saw an opportunity to leverage the public sentiment surrounding Germanicus's legacy. Discussions about the need for reforms gained traction, as senators recognized the potential for change in the wake of such a significant loss. Agrippina, too, began to make her mark within the political sphere. Her speeches resonated with the populace, and she skillfully navigated the complex dynamics of the Senate. Though she faced opposition, her presence at public gatherings and her willingness to challenge the status quo solidified her position as a powerful voice for the people. Chapter 9. The legacy of Germanicus. As the months passed, the legacy of Germanicus continued to grow. Statues were erected in his honor throughout the city, and public spaces were named after him. The memories of his military triumphs became intertwined with tales of his character, painting a vivid picture of a man who embodied the best of Roman virtues. Historians and poets began to immortalize Germanicus in their works, recounting his bravery in battle and his commitment to justice. His name became synonymous with honor and loyalty, inspiring future generations to aspire to his ideals. The narrative surrounding his life and death became a touchstone for those who sought to understand the complexities of power and the sacrifices made in the name of duty. Agrippina, too, became an emblem of resilience, embodying the spirit of her late husband. Her efforts to uphold his legacy established her as a key figure in Roman history, and the bond she shared with the people of Rome solidified her status as a beloved leader.